Hi everyone. I'm in my studio today, so it might sound a little bit echoey, but today I want to talk about how to distinguish intuition from fear or from our instinct. So, as you probably know, I'm really passionate about listening to your intuition all the time in a practical way. And I think it's really, really important to living a creative life. And if you haven't heard my story, a few years back, I went from sort of being this very logical, practical designer slash illustrator to following my intuition completely and just saying kind of like, I'm just going to follow my intuition because I have had it with burnout and with keeping myself small and with abandoning myself and what I really want to do. So I'm going to teach you today, I'm going to give you a story in my life about, I think a lot of us, we're really afraid to trust our intuition. And I work with my clients a lot on this, but the subtlety, because the intuition is very subtle, right? And so a lot of us go through this thing where we're like, is this my intuition or is it my fear? And why is it important for us to be able to trust our intuition? I always say that your intuition is like your GPS, right? And so your intuition helps us to pivot in our career, in our life. So when people come to me and for coaching, they all oftentimes are a lot like in their head, right? They're spinning in their head saying like, we have so many options of things that we could do, right? How do I focus? Or like, let's say for you, like maybe you are, you feel like you should leave your job, or you feel like you should take another job or look for another job. How do you make that decision and distinguish if it's your intuition or not? So your intuition is like a GPS. It guides you along your journey to your most authentic life, to your most authentic expression. And what I've found in myself and with others and people that I follow who are on this journey is that it does not fail you. So there's a lot of misinterpretation out there because there's not a lot of people who are doing this. So I love helping people to connect to their intuition. And so let's go. Let's start on this journey. And I want to help you to distinguish between fear or instinct, right? So a lot of people think that instinct is the same as intuition, but it's not. So, all right, let's get into this. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life and I'm going to give you some tips at the end of this video to ask yourself, what to ask yourself to distinguish between what is fear and what is intuition. So here's my example. When I was back in my late 20s, mid to late 20s, I had a major shift in my life. So if you go back and listen to the video about my story, you can hear about that. But I was in this major shift and I had known for a while that I wanted to go back to art school. And so I had this sort of inner knowing or inner drive, which I'm going to tell you was my intuition. So I'm going to sort of try to describe this for you. And everybody feels their intuition or senses. Intuition is not a feeling, right? So it's more like a knowing. So intuition is a knowing that just bypasses your logical mind. So a lot of times it will feel not logical. So I had this inner knowing, and I mean, honestly, a lot of the times you can sense this from years back, right? But I had this inner knowing that I wanted to go to art school, and I can trace this back to when I was very young, but I had kind of pushed it down. But it really started coming up when I was going through the shift, and it was coming up stronger and stronger and stronger. So something for you to recognize is intuition is like a knowing, right? It's kind of like an inner knowing. So number one. Number two, a lot of times it doesn't feel logical. It doesn't seem logical, right? So I had this inner knowing, but how was I going to do it? I had no money. I was broke. I was in debt. I had no idea what I was going to do in order to get there. Number three, I was feeling it in my body. Like I can sense right now that I felt it in my gut. So a lot of times people will feel it either in their heart or their gut, whereas fear a lot of times will captivate the mind, and it'll feel like thinking a lot of times. And so I knew that I wanted to go to art school. So that was my intuition, right? So we'll just kind of set that aside. And what happened was I was in this place where I had left all of my church. It was like an abusive church relationship, my abusive husband. A lot of my friends had left because they were in that situation. They didn't like the fact that I left the church. So I was very alone. And it was, let's just say it was like the best of times and the worst of times. I had a lot of trauma. There was a lot of emotional anxiety and all of these things. So I was living in LA, and my dad was, always wanting me to kind of come back to where they lived. And I grew up in LA, but they lived in the Midwest, and I had lived there before too, and I hated it. And so he wanted me to move back there and go to school there. And so one time when I was feeling very weak, very emotionally vulnerable, alone, he was like, just come back. And so I was like, okay. And I packed up all my stuff. I think I moved in like a day or two. I actually called my therapist, and she was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I did it. And for me, when I look back at this situation, it was an action that came out of fear. So what happens when you're sort of in this situation and you don't have a lot of stability, right? We can go into instinct or we can go into fear. And so when you have sort of a reaction, a lot of people say that like that's your intuition. Not necessarily. That can be instinct, right? And we can go back, so we can go, when we experience this, we're not in a calm, stable place where we can hear our intuition. Instinct can take over, or fear can take over, right? So I went, and went back to live with my parents, and it was a struggle because I truly believe that my intuition was guiding me to my authenticity, to opening me up to my authenticity, which it did along that path as well. There's no mistakes, right? There's absolutely no mistakes. But that turning point, I definitely think I did out of fear. I could have done it more consciously. So perhaps if I had thought about it and worked through it a bit more, and I had come to the conclusion that my intuition was leading me. But I know for certain that moment, I felt afraid. So what did I do? I went backwards into my comfort, which was my old way of doing things. So what fear does, or what instinct does, in a fight or flight, it moves you backwards instead of expanding you forwards. I look back at myself then and I'm like, there's not a lot more you could have done. Like that, you made the logical choice, right? But it was also kind of a fear-based choice. And so that was my MO, right? Was always to go back to sort of comfort, somebody taking care of me, going back to that safety. And even my therapist recognized that and recognized sort of the danger of going back into kind of the situation that I was trying to escape from. And even to this day, I look back at that choice and I think, what if I had stayed? What if I had not made the fear decision, right? What if I had trusted? And so trusting our intuition takes a lot more patience. It takes a lot more depth of our being. It takes a lot more of our will to be able to trust ourselves and grit in ourselves, really, instead of going back into the fear response. So intuition feels like a calm knowing. It's what you sense when you're in a calm place. It keeps coming back. So it keeps nudging you. It's like a subtle little nudge or a little ping. It feels loving or expanding. It's like a knowing, a loving knowing or nudge, right? It feels maybe warm. You can maybe feel it in your heart center or in your gut. And so that's the way that I would describe intuition. So fear feels like a lot of times you'll sense this confusion. So you might also feel it in your gut, but it feels different, right? It feels like more of a tension in your gut or a tension in your heart or kind of your mind spinning. So that's what fear or instinct can feel like a lot of times in your gut too. That sensation of, oh, yeah, I've got to do this now, right? Intuition never feels like I've got to do this now. Why? Because there's no wrong path. Intuition is always in the present moment. It's always taking you step by step, and it's all like a GPS. If you go off the path, it's always going to bring you back on, right? So fear feels like anxiety, nervousness, got to make a decision now, confusion. So that's what fear feels like. So some questions for you to ask yourself about this. So what is coming up for you right now? What questions, what decisions are you having to make in your life right now? Is there a decision that you're feeling confused about and you don't know if it's your intuition or fear or your instinct that wants to do something else? Maybe you're confused. So pinpoint what that is for you. What is the decision that you're trying to make? It could be about your business. It could be about your art or your life, anything really, your relationship. So pinpoint what is the decision that you're unsure of, and maybe you're looking outside of yourself for help on what the decision is, right? So when you're in a calm space, when you're in a calm state, do you know what the answer is? Or it might not be a complete answer. Like a lot of times our intuition doesn't give us a whole plan, right? What do you know? What is your intuition telling you? From what I described, that calmness, that knowing, even if it's hard to say what you know, I would challenge you to write it down. Even if you're like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this makes any sense. A lot of times, like I said, it doesn't make sense to the logical mind. So write it down and just sit with it and see if there are confirmations that come up. So we have to recognize the intuition for it to be able to show us more and give us more confirmations throughout our life. So it's like anything. We have to sort of build the muscle and the connections in our brain for us to be able to recognize it. So, or if you're not experiencing a knowing about this question that you're trying to make a decision on, is it in your mind? Is your mind spinning? Is it like going back and forth between the decision you're supposed to make? Are you going outside of yourself to try to find a decision? Are you retreating back or are you expanding? So intuition feels like I'm expanding into who I want to be, right? Our GPS, our intuition always is guiding us to who we authentically want to become, or are our most authentic expression. So does it feel like you're expanding, or does it feel like you're retreating back to your old ways of doing things, like my kind of I'm being taken care of or I'm being rescued? Your old patterns, your old habits. Is your the thing that you're trying to decide on, like if it's a job, maybe you're trying to decide between a job that's really going to challenge you and it feels really scary, but leads you more to your authentic self, or maybe one that is the same or leading you back, but it feels more safe, right? So if you're trying to decide between safety and between something that is challenging or scary or might not make a logical sense, sit with that. Which one is guiding you towards your most authentic self? Which one is you retreating back? Which one is expansive? That is the one that your intuition is probably guiding you to, okay? Your intuition is always guiding you towards expansion of your most authentic self. So when you're calm and you can sit with it, what does it feel like in your body? Do you feel it somewhere in your body, in your heart, in your gut? This can be hard for people who've experienced trauma, or maybe they don't feel anything in their body. That's okay. Maybe you feel it outside of your body, or you've gotten, you have an idea in your mind. That's okay too. But just know, like, if eventually you get more connected to your body, you might be able to feel sensations in your body. Are you feeling fear or anxiety? That can lead us to this instinct reaction. So we don't want to go backwards. We don't want to go into that instinct or fear. So you want to tell life, I want more of who I'm becoming, right? And life is going to give you more of that. So these decisions, there's never a wrong decision, right? Like with my decision, it wasn't a wrong decision, but I do still look back at it and think, what if, right? And so, not to put pressure on you, but we want to make decisions with the most clarity, especially big decisions with the most clarity, so that when we get to the end of our life, we're not looking back and thinking, well, what if I did that? What if I didn't do that? And listening to your inner GPS, listening to your intuition is going to guide you to your most fulfilling, most authentic life along the way. And in any decision, not even just the big decisions, but little decisions in every day where you can live with joy and expansion and enjoy life along the way. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, or I'd love to hear any comments from you about how you hear your intuition and what it feels like for you. So please leave those in the comments, and I will see you soon.